What if fear of the truth didn't hold us back?
Instead of having to do the research yourself, we've done it for you. Tune in each week as real moms drop some truth bombs.
Answers start now.
Okay, so today, guys, we're going to talk about first-time mothering and the choice between breastfeeding and formula. One thing that I learned in the mommy community is, as much as we want to be accepted and be like, "Oh, you're a great mom, you're doing your best," it is it is politically divided.
Yeah,
in that sense.
Yeah,
when
super
it comes
judgmental.
It can be,
and people aren't even trying to judge. I've had moments where I've judged, and I'm like, I'm really not trying to judge, but I'm judging right now. I'll own that all day long, but it's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And the visceral activity, I mean, you think that Republicans and Democrats fight it out? I mean, go against a formula versus a breastfeeding mom and see what happens.
I agree.
It gets scary out there when it comes to that. And just parenting in general, is mom and dad both in the picture versus, is it are there two moms or two dads? Like, though, because I have friends who on Instagram that I follow that I love, that are part of, a 2-mom family or a 2-dad family. And I personally don't, it's not a view that I care, right?
Yeah,
like I support a happy child.
Yeah. 100%.
Right. And so when I see this visceral activity online, I'm like, holy shit. Right. Like, I can only imagine, and it is probably why I stepped back from being so, because I really did a lot of online stuff, and I'm sure people are going to say, I get it now. When River was when she was just born, when I was pregnant, when I first found out I was pregnant to probably about a year, I was super River was in everything. She was around, and I not necessarily was creating like mom content with my child. But I was she was just part of everything. And so I was excited to share. And the more that happened, the more I got criticism on things. And so I decided, not necessarily, I mean, and I know there's some people who are like, I'm never showing my kid. Kids shouldn't be part of the internet.
I thought I was going to do that. And
there's a part of me that agrees with a lot of it. Definitely not. I think we can go down this road later. I do think that there is a point where you are exploiting your child. But for the most part, people have to remember our generation started in social media as like a journal, right? We were the MySpace era.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of times when I feel like I'm sharing, I forget that I have 270, thousand people, right?
Yeah.
I'm just proud of my kid and I want to share it and I'm excited. Or there's something I've learned that I want to share about motherhood to my kids in the picture.
Well, you're sharing what makes you happy. And in this moment, the thing that makes you happiest the most, or, the most happy, is your kid.
Right.
And you just watching them grow and just learn about the world and interact with the world. Catching that on film is just but
I do agree, making them do skits or dances. I do think that there's a point where it becomes exploitive, putting them in all your market. What was that fighter guy that Prime?
Oh, Jake Paul.
Yeah. And they just had a baby and there was that huge thing that went online.
Oh, I did not see that.
Okay. So he had a baby with Nina Agdal.
Okay.
The supermodel.
Okay.
Beautiful girl, beautiful baby. And in the delivery room, she's in the bed, they just have a baby. He's promoting, I think, Prime.
Probably, yeah.
Or he's promoting something. It was basically an ad.
Yeah.
And everyone was lit about it. In those instances, I agree. There are some things that we should be private and not make as a capitalization moment.
Yeah.
But I also, it's such a weird Wild West world because that's not my kid, not my problem.
Right.
Because you can make an argument for child stars, right? Like Britney Spears. You can make an argument. Right. You can make an Amanda Bynes. You can make an argument for, the kids that have gone through, you're 12 years old and your parents put you through, I don't know, a space camp. There's so many things that can, when you choose something for your child, could go wrong. So I choose to believe that, again, my mantra is everybody's not doing it for nefarious reasons. I think most of the time. They're just proud. They're excited. And hey, by the way, let's make a couple extra bucks for some diapers.
Well, and you know that there's a law now that I don't know if it's here yet, but I think there's a law somewhere. Can't tell you where a kid actually has to earn 30%. If they're in a video now, anything which makes
so much sense.
Yeah.
However,
they're not consenting to it.
right. However, and this is where it gets, people like Jake Paul, fine. People like the mom who can't afford the rent, and so she went viral off a couple videos that her kid happened to be a part of and got a brand deal with a diaper brand and now can afford something. That is where I have a hard time with, because yes, I should pay and will pay River and will pay, like my plan with our business and, moving forward is to make our kids employees and get them set up for life, right? Like, yes, they should absolutely be a part of that.
1000%.
But people who live in like, lower income housing who are barely making it by and get one good brand deal, are we really going to put them and say like, hey, that maybe the $2,000 they made, 30% of that has to be saved because that kid needs that money now. Does that make sense?
No, 100%.
Like that's a school lunch, like that, for a year, or like clothes that they may need. Like how do you really understand that? And that's what I'm talking. I get so like flipped about it because I'm like, man, I definitely don't want people to exploit their children and use them for money. No, but I think that for the most part, people who can't really afford it and are just getting by and have their kids part of this fun content, that's a choice they're making because it's getting them money. Because the other argument that I have is that then why is the child industry so fucking lucrative? Right? I've made more money than I ever have off of baby brands. I would argue that because when I was on Very Cavallari, I was making good money, but my brand deals were like dog food and I don't know, like drinks and stuff like that. Right now that there's a total huge market. It's marketed towards parenting, and whether it's a toy brand or a diaper brand or something for your kids, like Frida Baby, right? There's so many brands out there that are marketing. It's hard not to get lost in it. And so when I hear people just like come after these mothers, it absolutely just wrecks me or come after these parents rather. Because like, I like, when it's bad, like that one mom that went to jail, right? Yeah. On YouTube. What was her name? Ruby something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was straight up like abusing her kids and like not feeding them,
right?
And locking them in rooms.
And she was saying it online, right? Yeah. She was like very vocal about it.
Yeah, she's like, "This is how you get your kids to behave."
Yeah, I think every once in a while, if you get a cool brand deal with your kid, like I don't know, I have a hard time. Like you don't know someone's finances and what they're going through, and if that could have helped them have meals for a year, I just don't. I don't like the idea of regulating something without figuring out what the algorithm for that would be correctly per family, because not all families are the same, right?
Yeah.
But I digress. We're not talking about that. We're talking about breastfeeding.
Okay, Trump. Sorry, I had to.
Well, this is another one that just like, it just kills me. I'm like, okay, so I want to preface this by saying, I don't care as long as your kid is coming first. I don't care who you parent with. I don't care how you parent, like where you live. I don't care if you choose formula or breastfeeding. What I do care about is, just saying like, look, breastfeeding was a choice of mine. I knew I wanted to do it. And I know in my family, and this is not the case for everybody, but genetically speaking, it came easy. So I knew it wasn't going to be a problem. I didn't have any anxiety about breastfeeding or during breastfeeding. There's a thing that came out about, I don't know why the name is escaping me now, but it's basically like a depression while breastfeeding. I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any postpartum. I had no issues with latch. She did have a tongue tie, but it was like, I had an oversupply, so I never worried about it. So breastfeeding was an easy choice to make.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't have to make any other choices.
Right.
It wasn't an avenue that I needed to explore. I knew that I wanted to be breastfeeding. Breastfeeding came easy. Breastfeeding was successful. And that's pretty much the end story for me.
Right.
Where I was trying to get back of like, I shared everything. I was sharing my breastfeeding journey. And I realized that I think, looking back at it, I was just sharing because I was proud of it. And I was excited that I had done something because I knew I was going to be good at it, but I didn't know it was going to be successful. You never know what's going to happen. Right. And so I was just proud of my body and what it had accomplished.
Right. As you should be.
Yeah. Right. But I didn't think about, if as we, have this podcast and we move on as what I would consider mommy bloggers, I don't want to ostracize anybody.
Right.
And I don't want to make someone feel less than because they're having an issue. So, yeah. Right. Or they just choose not to.
Right.
You know, I have followers who don't have kids and they don't want it. And I'm like, great, that's your choice,
Yeah.
right? I have followers who never wanted to breastfeed and they went to formula. Great, that's your choice.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to ostracize those people. And then even worse, as she got older, I mean, she was meant to spend 6 months, which is not even like the time most people stop. And I was already getting like, she has teeth now. That's gross. And I was like, oh,
we
buddy.
got that when we went to the zoo. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, go ahead. You say it.
It was the kangaroo. And we were going through the kangaroo and she was like, yeah, she's nursing and she's got teeth. And we were like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was something like that.
Yeah.
And we both looked at her like, all right.
Yeah, the girl behind
both
us.
of our kids have teeth and we're still breastfeeding.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the kangaroo.
Yeah.
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 She's
There's
like,
a little baby kangaroo and one of the zookeepers was like, can you imagine that kangaroo just gnawing on their mama with their teeth? And we were like, yep.
And I don't think what people realize too, like if we go back, if I'm going to take the pro breastfeeding stance, not anti-formula, just pro breastfeeding for a second. Breastfeeding has been around, you know, calculating wise over 6 million years, right? We know there's history of like, you know, breastfeeding. The first bottle, I think, was like not until like 5 or 4 million years ago in clay, right? So breastfeeding essentially is a very natural practice. It is your body, the placenta comes out, your body's being told, hey, it's time to become a milk machine. And it happens. And for some reason, for some women, you know, genetics speaking, it may not, but for me, it did. So it came easy. And what other people don't realize too is like, I think I learned this in birth class last night, that I think sometimes in motherhood, or in parenthood, we tend to look at parenting like we look at the kids as milestones.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you hit this many months, it's got to look like this. You hit this many months, it's got to look like this. And yes, there are some things, you know, to make sure that we're not falling behind developmentally.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes this rat race of, is your baby walking? Is your baby talking? Does your baby have teeth? Is your baby, you know, is your baby sleeping in the own bed? Is your baby sleeping through the night? And with breastfeeding, I felt like, though I was really proud of it, people were like, okay, she's 6 months, you should be done. And so after, I think, 6 or 7 months, I think I posted my last thing about it and I never talked about it again. And the truth is I still do. I mean, she's not fully weaned. She is 2.5. According to the American Pediatric Society, 2 is perfectly fine, right? They
recommend until 2.
They recommend until 2. Our pediatrician is like, look, at other cultures, I mean, the kids are like, I think there's like kids like 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
We're not probably going to take it that far, but I didn't think that we would be this far. I parent on a very like co-parenting style. You know, if my child is in fear, if she needs comfort, if she needs her mom, it's not something that bothers me. And so I didn't make the choice to like completely wean her.
Mm-hmm.
We were trying to wean, it was hard. And then I got pregnant and, you know, the pediatrician had said, look, it's not harmful because you're not, and my midwife as well, it's not harmful because you're not high risk. It actually can be beneficial to the mother in the sense of I don't really have to pump because I essentially have a pump.
Right.
And it's being used for other uses.
Yeah.
It obviously will help her immune system and her gut system.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it's my choice.
Yeah.
I think people, because we have a over-sexualized society and an over idea of like what things should be, I'm even fearful to say like, yeah, every once in a while she gets a little sad and she comes over. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Or every once in a while she's scared.
You're afraid
and
that people are watching you or judging you.
And I know they are. And
yeah.
but I think in the beginning I cared.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I don't give a shit. My kid is happy. My kid is healthy. And this is our journey.
Yeah.
She's not going to be 6 years old doing this.
Yeah.
Right. And as I go into a new journey with a new baby, what I didn't want resentment.
Right.
So I'm not going to kick her off
anymore.
Right. I'm not going to kick her off and then immediately put another baby on. And then, it wasn't something that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But in the realm of breastfeeding, I think it's just so funny because you have this idea like, I'm going to stop after this many months and then we're going to move forward to this and we're going to do it this way. And it just doesn't vibe with me that we have parenting milestones.
Right.
Especially because every baby and every body is different.
So different. I mean, even I think you and I, one of our first mom walks as me as a new mom, you were like, he takes a bottle and I think he was like 2 or 3 months. And you're like, I can't get river to take a bottle. And I think that that's a huge thing of weaning. Like if you can get them on a bottle, you can eventually probably wean them a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But just when you have breast exclusively, that's so hard. I can't even imagine that. I mean, that's so tough.
And what's so funny is everyone's like, well, you should have, we did exactly what was told to us. Like, hey, give it 2 weeks before you introduce a bottle because we don't want to have breast confusion, right?
Right.
And after 2 weeks, she was not confused at all. She was like,
she's like, nope, I like what I like.
Absolutely not. This is not warm. This is cold. This is plastic. I don't fucking want this. So
like, microplastics, no thank you.
My God. So, I mean, again, and then some people will be like, oh, don't tell people that because they'll give their babies bottles too soon. Do whatever you want, right? If it makes your body and your baby easier to do things, like, I think that's what this is. Like, there is no parenting book that basically is like, you got to feel it out, right?
There's so many things that I think that, and I know you can probably relate to this. Going into motherhood, you're like, I'm going to do it this way. And then it all changes. And I think we hear this narrative all the time, but it's really so true. Because I'm such a planner and an organizer, and I'm like very opinionated. I'm going to do it this way, this way, this way. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of that shit is out the door.
Yeah.
It's out the door, and I've found what works. And some of the stuff that I've found is, hey, this actually works better, or I actually like this more. This might be an even better way to do it.
Yeah.
But there's some that, like, for screen time, my kid watches Bluey every day. Like, I was like, oh, no TVs. No, I need to be able to get things done. I can't sit down and color with him every day. I can't sit down and play with him.
My child, I work from home, I would say probably 60 to 70% of the time, right? So because childcare is a whole other fucking issue we can go into. But so when I get to the office, it's easy. I'm focused. I got this done. When we're at home, it is like there is a signal in her brain that goes, Mom's on the phone. I need to scream as loud as I can to get her attention because she's not allowed to talk to anybody but me. So you're damn right I'm going to give her a screen, right?
Yeah.
That's not lazy parenting.
No.
There's no such thing as like let them be bored in that situation, because if they're bored, they're going to bother you. And I'm on a call with very important people for work. I'm trying to keep my job.
In order
my
to
kids
feed
in the background
her.
going, mommy, 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 mommy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And what am I going to do? I can't lock her in a cage.
Right.
She's a kid. There's no like.
Well, according to Ruby, you can.
According to Ruby, you could. But I can't walk out. It's dangerous for me to walk out of the house. She has to be within eye view.
Yeah.
So the only way to make that work is to put something in front of her face that's going to take her attention away from me.
Exactly.
And that happens to be a screen. It sucks. It's the world we live in.
You feel the guilt.
I feel the guilt every single time I put it in front of her face. But in order for me to take that phone call, I don't even care about taking a shit by myself. In order for me to take a phone call and have an adult conversation with work, I have to get her distracted.
Yes.
So, and everybody can say, well, you can schedule your calls around her nap. Like, nope, she's 2. She doesn't take, her naps are at 3:00. That's the end of everybody's day.
Yeah.
Right. I can't schedule it for only the days that she has daycare either. That's not fair for work.
And those naps, even if they are in a nap schedule, they're not guaranteed, and you have no idea how long they're going to last.
No.
Or if they go down.
Right.
So they're not guaranteed at all.
Right. So we live in we talked about this on, previous episodes. We live in a really different fast-paced world now. Like, you would think that with the COVID era, we're like, okay, we need to slow down. No, what it taught us was we don't need to go in the office quite as much, but we can work twice as many hours if we're home.
Exactly.
I'm never shut off from work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the only time that I get peace and quiet is 6 a.m. or 7 p.m. because PJ works, my partner works from literally gets up at 5 a.m. and is gone by 6 and then doesn't come home till 5:30. And that's, because he's got a big job, and the only way that he can get gym time in is in between those hours as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 12 hours essentially, if not more, that I have to figure out what to do.
Yes.
Right?
Can you imagine sorry to interrupt you, but
ahead.
Can you imagine the people, I always think about this because we know, or I think I've said it before, my husband also works. He leaves around 6-ish if he's not going to the gym to get to work by 6:37. He's gone until 6:37 at night. So it's like a 12-hour day. And I always think about the women that have their husbands or their spouses or anybody that has their significant other that's completely out of town during the week.
Oh,
or
months on end. I have a girlfriend whose husband, he has a family job that, his dad's basically retiring. And so he's taking over family business in California.
Yeah.
And they live in Tennessee. And he's gone. At one point he was gone like every week, like every other week. And she
Yeah.
was like, I can't, you gotta give me some time. So now I think he spends 2 weeks home, 2 weeks off, whatever.
Okay.
But that's still 2 weeks without a partner.
That's a
you know,
lot.
and I give it to single moms like who have no help,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're doing it on your own, girlfriend or guy friend, and you're by yourself, or you are, you know, a divorcee parent and you have kids, you know, singularly for a period of time, that is rough, especially when they're younger, you know?
So rough.
And so I think the guilt sets in, and maybe this isn't the breastfeeding episode. I think the guilt sets in of like, how do I make my child's childhood good, still maintaining within the boundaries of being a mom, like, and a person. I still have like Brittainy the employee.
Yeah.
And then now we have Brittainy the podcaster, right? That takes, what is this, 2 to 3 hours of our time, right?
Yeah.
And then we have the, you know, the editing and stuff like that.
And
then
behind
I have
the scenes and the chats that we have to have.
right.
And the calls.
And then I have just Brittainy the person that just like wants to go out with my friends for a coffee.
Yeah.
You know? And like, how do you manage all of that? And then without guilt. So, you know, to bring it back to breastfeeding, I was like, you know, I wanted to wean, but then she would come home. We finally did daycare-ish setting. It's like basically like a childcare center. Co-working space. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she would be maybe 4 or 5 hours, and she would hold out, wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink. If she could, she would nap through it.
Whoa.
And she was like 7 or 8 months, like until about a year and a half that she finally
super
was
young. So that was like, I mean, now doing that, like,
yeah, she's good
but
now. Now she'll
then-
eat, right? There's something that, you know, we can give her snacks or whatever. But at that point, she was still very much like mostly breast.
mm-hmm.
And she just would hold. So I'm like, my baby's like starving.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel good about it. I felt upset about it. And so it became one of our bonding things. It was like, mommy makes me feel safe. Mommy makes me feel comforted. This is, you know, a source of nourishment for me. And the last thing in my mind was like, okay, I got to be done. You know, are there moments where I'm like, this is absolute torture? Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, great. I would love to have my body
Space.
autonomy back,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
But it's going to end. And it is not something I'm ever going to regret. So that was my choice.
Personally, my plan was to go to 2 years. I really wanted that. And I got to the point where I just couldn't. And I'll get into that for a second, but I just want to tell you, like, I wish I could do what you're doing. Like, I miss it, honestly. Now, being on the other side, I miss that connection with my kid.
Yeah.
I'm excited to do it again and maybe go longer.
Yeah.
Hopefully go out longer. So
What was your decision to switch?
So I don't know why, but I got caught up in the rat race as if I was like not a stay-at-home mom, that I thought I had to produce all this milk to store, even though I was always with him. I was a stay-at-home mom. I don't know why I thought this. I think all my friends
Because nobody tells you any different.
Right.
So
Like,
you get to the hospital. Let's go back for that for a second.
Yeah.
You get to the hospital, you know, you get the lactation consultant and they're like, okay, you need to pump every 2 hours, every 3 hours, get some milk out, and then you give your baby, right? And so in your brain, you have a schedule. I have to pump, then I feed the baby, or I feed the baby and then I pump, whatever it is, but you're always pumping and feeding. And they're like, that's to get your milk up. And it wasn't until I started following like I think it's the Milky Mama, or I'll post some of these people that I follow, but a lot of them are like, actually, if you're full-time, if you're EBF, which is exclusively breastfeeding, you don't really need like, as if your supply is okay.
Yeah.
We have this like weird rat race thing in moms that they have to produce gallons of milk and feed a child.
Yes.
And you're basically telling your body, like your body is essentially a plant, right? It's like a work plant. The more that there is demand, the more that there is supply. Usually, the more that there is demand, the more there is supply. You're basically telling your body you need to feed 3 kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I was also comparing myself to my best friend who didn't know that she was an oversupplier. So she's trying to give me, she's like, you should be at this point. And then I was like doing more research and I'm like, Wendy, I think you're an oversupplier. Like you're saying that you are producing, I think it was like, I can't remember all of the ounces, but like it was an insane amount.
Yeah, I was doing,
I think it was like 5 or 6 ounces every single breast. And I was like, I'm doing that with 2.
Yeah.
And I just felt so like I couldn't
Yeah. My
produce
slacker
enough.
boob was 4 ounces.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
had a slacker boob of 4 ounces, and then I had 6 to 8 ounces on the other boob.
So
And that
overproducer.
was terribly overproducing.
Yeah. See, I
And-
was jealous of the overproducers.
But see, I was buying like lactation cookies,
yeah.
thinking that, but I was in
That's
the same
why?
boat, but oversupplying because I was like, oh, I gotta do more. I gotta do more. I gotta do more. I gotta
Yeah.
do more. Right? Like not knowing that like I literally, we ended up doing the booby food, which you turn it into essentially a powder. So it has like a 10-year shelf life.
Yeah.
I basically have what would be considered like a formula, breastfeed formula, for 3 months for the next baby.
Wow.
Because I produced so much and I was able to put that away,
Yeah.
you know? And so if you think about you're doing that and you're not dry, it's basically dry freezing your breast milk.
Right.
That shit only lasts in the freezer for 6 months to tops a year.
Yeah.
That's so much breast milk.
Yeah. It is.
So you're either giving it away or you're using it for
a milk bath.
a milk bath,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, cool in and of itself. But if your baby doesn't have eczema, you don't need it.
Right.
But you're like, holy crap, this whole time I'm under the impression that I have to produce so much more than I need to.
Do you want to see something funny?
Yeah.
It's actually like a visual that I can show you.
Amazing.
I made a whole schedule
What?
in
To breastfeed?
in Outlook.
Did you time yourself? Did you have like it on a timer?
Oh yeah. I got like an Outlook like reminder to do this of all the
I just did it by the
days.
leak. If I was leaking, it was time to do it.
Oh, it was a whole activity calendar. Let me pull this up real quick. We can cut some of this
Let me
out.
remind the viewers and listeners out there that Courtney is a professional organizer, and so her whole life is these organizing sheets. So this is very on
They're
brand. This is very on
They
brand.
make me so happy. Oh my gosh. All right.
I know
have to
you
go.
should. You should have seen your face when I was like, "Hey, you want to do a Monday board for Truth Moms?" And you were like, "Yes."
Yes. I was like, you're speaking my language. Where is it? I had it all on. Wait, it was beautiful. All right. I'll have to show you.
Okay, you should pop it up.
I'll pop it up and then we'll get Brittany's reaction.
Yeah, you could sell them for $5 for the people that.
It was insane. It was like activity with him, play with. I mean, it was down to like, because I had to figure out where to get my pumps in, and then also like remind myself, hey, you got to give him his medicine. Because I was just in that, and I was also in the postpartum like feeling like I needed structure in my day because I was so used to working with a career, so I just needed all of that. It was kind of insane. So I also put this unnecessary pressure for myself in this calendar.
Yeah,
It was a lot. My best friend was like, you are insane. Like that is, she just was like, I'll have to put her reaction in here. Too,
we'll have to interview a lactation consultant. I think that'd be a great interview.
Can I talk about that real quick?
Go for it.
I don't know if you really used it because it sounds like it came pretty natural to you.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing I tell new moms, and I totally do it with unsolicited advice. I go, are you thinking about breastfeeding? And they go, yes. I was like, can I just give you some unsolicited advice in the hospital, something that changed my whole outlook because I was having issues. Get a lactation consultant
100%.
in the hospital. And they're not always the best, but find one that will sit down with you and really work with you.
Or
Not just check on you.
right.
Yeah.
Or what I'm finding now with it, so there's one at Hopewell, or I'm not sorry, she's at Nova. I guess I would consider Nova. Her name's Chelsea. She's a lactation. There are plenty in your area, I guarantee, that maybe not from the hospital, but it, just like a doula or a midwife or anybody in your birth team.
Yes.
And honestly, I think insurance covers a lot of it.
I went to the free one at Vanderbilt after I got out of the hospital.
There's a lot of it, but I agree with you. If you can afford a consultant out of the hospital, or if you can't, just find someone that you can connect with. But 1,000% go to a lactation consultant.
Yes. And I'm saying a good one. There's
Yeah.
some that will just come and check. Like they usually do their rounds. They'll come and check on you and they're like, how you doing? How's it going? Okay, bye. Like they're just doing a
Right.
check the box activity. I had this wonderful woman. I'll never forget her name. Her name is Kelly. And she sat down and for 45 minutes worked with me, told me to do this, do that. And she said, okay, I'm going to send you home. I already had a pump. I had an LV pump. I'm going to send you home with
Hospital grade pump.
hospital grade pump. And that is the biggest advice I can give
Yep.
to moms. Is
1,000%.
you take I think it's $25 a
Carrie
week.
Carrie Locher with somebody that I follow online that she is a nurse, and she says the same thing. Because a lot of us, and I got swindled into it too. This is the first time mom thing, right? I was doing all these speaking of baby brands, I was doing all these ads, and one of the things was for the ones that the travel with you.
Belby
Pumps
that you just stick in your bra.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I had.
What people don't tell you about those is that your body is starting to figure out, you think about a baby suck. Your body is trying to figure out like how much is to produce, what the suck feels like, all of that stuff. And those mobile devices are battery run. So if you think about anything that you've ever, a remote starts to get whacked out when you're at a battery. If you're thinking about something that you're pumping and pulling, essentially it will pull less. One, two, no one talks to you about flange size, which is a huge
I was gonna
thing.
say that. Yes.
Huge. And then they don't explain to you, right? There's different nipples. Those I have a friend who had an inverted nipple who needed a nipple shield, right? That's a whole thing. You need someone to really, a lactation consultant is someone who will really sit down with you. And I guarantee you, if you want to do it prior to the hospital, I think it's like $250 is the most for some really good ones out there. Like if that's the one thing you save for that insurance doesn't cover, if breastfeeding is a goal of yours, then 100% talk to somebody about walking through like, what do I actually need? And one of those things that Carrie also mentions is you need to get something that's hospital grade or something that plugs into a wall. Because this is something that'll give you a consistent suck and and then your body will be fine. And then, hey, every once in a while, if you're out at the mall and you have to do it, then you use your...
Or at dinner. I used to do it at dinner all the time.
Right, because you're like, shit, I'm not... I need more than 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is.
Right.
And you need something just to, you need a Haka or an LV or whatever. Use it then. But don't make it your primary source.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that's something I didn't know either.
Yeah, the hospital grade is key.
Yeah.
Another thing is for my personal experience, I know you had something similar. I know you had a tongue tie thing. But I kept asking.
That was a lactation consultant. My pediatrician and my lactation consultant were the two ones that said that.
So
before I went,
I asked every doctor that came into the room. I said, "Does he have a tongue tie?" And even a good lactation consultant, the one that I had in the room that was really helping me, she was like, "No, no, no, no." The two people that told me that he did was my chiropractor, and then also my pediatrician at the time. And then it was confirmed when what is it, IBL? There's like a acronym that it's like IBLC or something like that. I'm going to butcher it. But the person that actually performs the tongue tie.
got it. Okay. So
confirmed it. I thought it was like in different spots. They were like, nope.
Yeah.
So like asking 1 million people and getting a second, third, fourth, fifth,
before
sixth.
you do anything. I would say there are people who don't need them and they just kind of rush into them, right?
Right.
And then there are people like I met, when I was considering River's tongue tie, there was like a woman, I'll never forget, who was sitting in the office and her kids had just gone through it and she realized she had one later on.
Yeah.
She's in her 30s and she's like, I wish I would have known this.
Right.
It
wasn't a thing though.
No. So at the same, that's what I'm saying is like, it is a thing as in people are now recognizing it. But I do agree that you need to get a couple of, because there's levels of tongue ties that can outgrow themselves with different stretches or, maybe the baby's like too young and there's not enough development in the mouth. And so after a while that may actually relieve itself. We didn't get Rivers until she was 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And I for a minute there, I was like, I wish I gotten it sooner. And I was like, nope, I'm glad I didn't because at that point we had 4. We had a breastfeeding specialist, a lactation consultant, the pediatrician, and then the dentist, the IBL herself, who confirmed it. So I'm like, okay. And none of those people are connected to each other. They're all different offices. So, I remember her, the friend was like, oh, all these people are in it together and they're making money. I'm like, they don't even know each other. They don't even know each other.
No.
So for all of them to confirm the very same thing,
yeah,
I felt good about my decision.
Exactly.
And again, I hear myself. I'm like, shit, that was $50 here, $100 here, $50 here.
It's so worth it.
It is worth it. But
because you don't know if it would have affected her speech later on. You don't know if it would have affected her getting milk. Like you don't know what you don't know.
But for people who are trying to save their pennies, I get that is an expense.
Right.
And so, when you're thinking about having children or if you have the ability to save some things, I would put a fund or I did Rocket Money because I happened to do an ad with them. But I had put funds away and I just happened to have all the money I needed for these extras. Basically the rainy day fund. And that rainy day fund went to things that pertain to River.
Right.
That were unexpected expenses.
Right.
That
right.
insurance didn't cover.
And you don't think about it until you're in the situation.
No.
Like, not my kid.
Yeah.
Right. But these are things that I feel like people don't talk about, is like the tongue ties, like what happens as soon as you start
you're right, but
breastfeeding.
you're like, none of those things like made sense. I remember telling my parents that, that River had a tongue tie, and they're like, a what?
Yeah.
Because that wasn't a thing.
I don't remember exactly what the science is behind it. I think we should probably have like a tongue tie specialist come on the show. I think that'd be super interesting. But it has to do with folic acid and folate.
Right. River has it's a genetic trait. River has an MTHFR SNP. And the MTHFR, it's called the motherfucker gene.
Oh, that's what
I call it. But because it's MTHFR, it looks like motherfucker.
I always read it like that. Okay.
It has to do something with that specific SNP and the calcium, I guess the calcium or something that develops in the mouth, whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, we could totally get a tongue tie specialist to come in here and talk about it. That'd be great.
So interesting.
There's so many people we can talk to.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that we, when like life is so like, if River had developed a tongue tie and I had not been able to get that diagnosed and I wasn't overproducing, she would have lost weight.
Yeah.
I would have freaked out and I would have been like, whatever, we're done. We're getting formula, you know? But I was like, I was overproducing, so she never lost weight. Yeah. So I didn't even know it was a problem. The pediatrician caught it. And then I just happened to be able to have the availability financially and, life-wise to be able to take her to these specialists to get these things done. Okay. And then we became successful from it, right? Yeah. So it's like, could have been two different ways and they would have been both totally different, fine. Right. So, yeah. Yeah. And the same thing with you. You went 3 months. Yeah. And then
3 months. And then I got to a point where I was in this rat race in my head that I had to keep up with all this. And no one was like, Courtney, you're a stay-at-home mom. You're good. You don't need a backstock of, breast milk. It doesn't make sense. You can literally just feed him on demand. And I don't know why I played this game in my head. I was also obsessed with watching these overproducers on Instagram. I would just like like, oh my gosh, that's
bags and bags and bags.
Satisfying. Yeah. I'm like, they'd wake up and I'm like, it would be like a huge jar. Yeah. And I'm like, that's so satisfying.
I'll never forget. I had my best friend's wedding and I was sending the stuff into Booby Food and FedEx. I was so nervous because if it's unfrozen, it's ruined.
It's done.
So I had to, and it was like 2 huge FedEx boxes.
Oh my God.
And I was like, this is literally liquid gold. I mean, it made it there. It was fine.
And another thing that can kind of be bad when it's liquid gold, you feel like you can't. Yeah. If you spill one little drop on the counter, you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Soak that shit up with a rag.
Yeah. It's fine. You
put
got
it on
more.
their butt. Yeah.
But no. So then I decided I didn't want to have that rat race in my head, and I would just kind of switch on and off with breastfeeding and formula. I felt like, okay, he's still going to get those nutrients from breastfeeding, but I'm going to, supplement with some formula just for my mental sake. Yeah. And we got to about, I think it was 8 or 9 months, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. What really set it off was, I know we talked about teeth. He got his teeth so early. He got his first 2 teeth at 2.5 months. So he started super early and he was biting me to the point where I started to react and I didn't want to hurt him. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I think it's time. I think it's time that we just do full on formula. I looked at stuff online. I thought I was giving him, we just talked about this. I thought I was giving him really, really clean formula with no seed oils. Yeah. But apparently I wasn't.
Yeah. You probably are giving him the cleanest because Kendall Mill.
I was giving him Kendall Mill.
Yeah. UK brands, like I think Kendall Mill, is it not Bobby?
It starts with an H. There's an H one.
Yeah. Holly. Yeah. And then there's a third one. Those are really great because they do make them with cleaner ingredients, but
there's still a sodium.
There is an FDA, speaking of legislator for food, there's an FDA legislation that you have to have some form of saturated fat in the in the formula. And so the easiest is seed oils.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't feel bad that I switched to that. I did what was mentally like.
He's a good, healthy kid.
Yeah, he is a good, healthy kid. Not far after that, we switched him right to raw milk. So it was like 3 or 4 months of just formula. And I'm like, he's fed.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Right.
It's
Fed
fine.
is best. And I think it's so funny because there is, again, the crunchy community or the breastfeeding versus formula community. They're so politically split. We talked about this earlier, but like fed is best.
Yeah.
1,000. I don't care. This is coming from somebody who's breastfed for 2 years. I don't care what it is. If your kid is hungry, the pride of like the breastfeeding or the whatever of their gut health, like it doesn't matter.
No.
Like a starving kid is worse than making sure there's some sort of microbiome growth or whatever the 100%. Hell it is. You know, like I think that's so funny that we just put this pressure on both ways of breastfeed, but not too long. Breastfeed, but not in public. Breastfeed, but, make sure you're doing it to this dimension. And then, formula is super demonized.
Yeah, it is. And what's interesting is that it used to be the go-to.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
I was going through this history.
Yes.
Okay. So let's see.
Like women in the 70s, you look that up. I'll talk about this. Women in the 70s and the 80s, I'm pretty sure were told not to breastfeed. And that formula was the new thing.
It goes even further than that. So like in the 1300s, if you were really rich, right? So aristocratic women hired wet nurses, right? Because they couldn't be bothered. So a wet nurse essentially is someone who has, who is essentially a lactation. A lot of them were women of color. Mm-hmm. But they were essentially hired like a maid service.
So you'd be a great wet nurse.
I would be an amazing wet nurse.
You missed your calling.
I did. Hopefully I could be paid better than these women though. But so, and then it was the 70s, the bottle was the better bottle was invented. And it wasn't really until, 1845, the rubber nipple was created. Manual breast pump is 1854. So until 1854, there was no such thing as breast pumping.
Right.
1865. So until 1865, if you were alternatively feeding your baby, it was cow's milk, sheep's milk, or a combination of animals.
Milk?
It was a combination of animal milk of some sort or a wet nurse. It wasn't until 1865 that they're actually feeding formula. That's when the first formula is developed by a chemist.
1865?
1865.
Oh, wow. I thought it was
made from cow's milk,
1900s.
wheat, and malt flour and potassium bicarbonate.
Huh.
It was considered nutritionally complete. 1923, the first electric breast pump. 1924 is Similac. So now we're in the 1900s. We're 1920s. So we're in the roaring 20s now.
Yeah. Where you're just adding water.
Yep. And then that's when when Similac is introduced, I think it's like 30 years later. Yeah. About 30 years later in the 1950s is when they were like, breastfeeding's old school. You don't need to do it. It's a waste of time. Formula is at this point superior to breast milk.
Yeah.
And it's the pendulum swang. Like everybody was like, oh, you're breastfeeding? You must be
poor. You poor bitch. Just kidding.
Okay, so many doctors encourage mothers to wean early or stop nursing altogether. 2 women in Illinois started, and this is 1956, started the Leche League, which is a grassroots group for moms to breastfeed. So there was only one breastfeeding support group out of Illinois.
That's crazy.
And there was no internet.
Yeah.
So if there was,
how do you get there?
You would have to hear it from word of mouth or like some sort of radio program, I'm guessing. I'm trying to think about what media they had back then. But yeah, there was no sort of, it was a truly grassroots program for breast support.
And people weren't really seeking it out.
Right.
Because it wasn't the thing.
1977, Nestle was boycotted. First boycott, which is at that point was the leading formula.
Okay.
Because there was a rise in the infant mortality rate. So at that point, even though they believed that formula was nutritionally complete, they also believed that there was something in the formula that was causing, basically SIDS or some sort of.
Did they ever get to the bottom of that?
Contaminated water.
Ah, okay. Which is huge.
Right. So again, we're going back to things were created for a great reason. Hey, there's moms that are having trouble feeding their babies. Let's create this. And then they were not keeping up with quality. So they basically were poisoning babies and this was happening, right? So contaminated water was the cause. 91 was the first hospital grade pump.
Okay.
That's literally like
That's like, yes,
20
well, to me, it's like 5 years ago,
Yeah,
but
right.
like,
yeah.
yeah, 25 years ago. Wait, my math is off on that. It's 23.
And then only 10 years ago in 2010, well, 13 years ago.
Wait, hold on. I have to go back. It's 33 years ago.
That was 33 years ago. We're old bitches.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
In 2010, so it's about 13 years ago. So literally with essentially a decade was the Fair Labor Standards Act. So until 2010, businesses were not required to provide employees with private places to nurse or breastfeed. There was no private spaces for lactation.
What did they do?
They sat in a corner or they got fired, essentially.
That's insane.
Yeah. So unless you had a really cool company that was like, yeah, here's a room you can use.
Yeah. And I think it's still hard
did it at the
today.
desk.
Like, I think about
Right.
my husband's office. I don't think that, I mean, he probably does. I don't want to like out him by any means. I don't think, whatever. I mean, there is definitely a space that they can go to, but I don't know where it is.
And we're talking about non-bathroom. So until then, it was non-bathroom for non-exempt, which is an hourly employee. So if you were a waitress, essentially up until 2010, you had to pump in a bathroom or a corner of some sort.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Can you imagine like being in a public bathroom pumping?
I've done it.
I don't think I could do that.
I can't. Honestly,
I can't poop in public, so I can't do that.
Oh, I can. I was in sales. I had to.
Let's see. Anything else significant? Oh, 2018. So this is like 5 years ago.
Yeah. Like
Utah and
really?
Idaho legalized breastfeeding in public. For the first time in history, breastfeeding is now publicly legal in all 50 states. 2018, y'all. That's literally like not very far ago.
What would you have done?
I'd go to jail.
Yeah.
If my baby's screaming.
Yeah.
Come on, Utah and Idaho.
That's crazy.
In 2019, breastfeeding, California passes a comprehensive lactation. Thank God California does something right. Comprehensive lactation accommodation law requiring all employers to provide all breastfeeding employees with a clean, safe lactation space. So even though now all 50 states are required to give them a space, it could still be a closet. It just can't be a bathroom. So you're still in the United States today.
A sanitized space. It could literally be like a.
That's what
closet.
California said has to be a clean, safe space. It cannot just be a closet.
Okay.
But still in other
so in Tennessee
states,
it can be a closet.
They just have to say you're allowed. Like, hey, as an hourly employee, you can go into the manager's office and lactate if you want.
Okay.
But that's still not a safe space.
No.
Like as an employee, if you create a business environment or have a building, you are not required by law to have a mother's room. We do at Uncommon James because, I mean, it's a woman-owned business. So like, shit, yeah, of course.
Right.
Right? But they do not, that's not required.
That's crazy.
To have a specific room for lactation.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So you're wondering
because men rule the world and they don't think about this stuff. But the problem,
right? But then you think about that's why. I mean, when you essentially make a choice, and then you feel guilty about it, right? For the women who are like, I'm not breastfeeding at all. That's something that they don't have to think about. It's for the women who are like, I'm breastfeeding regardless, like me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something you think about. It's the women that are like, I am pretty low key conservative about my body being exposed.
Right.
I know that it's important for me to breastfeed, and I'm feeling the pressure.
Right.
Those are the fence moms that you're like, we need to make sure that they have a place that's set up for success. Because the other thing I'm learning even in birth, because I did a birth class and there's so much shit. It's like second time around, you feel like I thought I knew everything and I still don't.
Yeah.
You have your neonatal cortex, right? Your neocortex, which is essentially your primitive brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that primitive part of your brain controls oxytocin. Oxytocin is everything that like makes you happy, gives you safe, has you feel safe, right?
Is that the same as the reptile brain?
I think. I don't know.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So anyway, basically we're talking about birth, and if you're feeling safe and you're in your environment and you're fine, everything flows correctly, right? Mm-hmm. You could basically stall birth if you're not in a comfortable environment. And that's why we see a lot of these women in hospitals have some emergencies. So long story short, the same thing goes for breastfeeding. You're not going to be successful if you're stressed out thinking you have 15 minutes to pump the most you can. You're not drinking enough water because you're stressed out at work. You're trying to get to your baby. Your body will not produce the necessary hormones to make sure that you are releasing enough. So, and then thinking about it stresses you out more. And the more you stress, the more that your body is going to go into fight or flight. And the more your body in that primitive brain is going to be like, I'm shutting this shit down because you're preserving, basically it's your body's way of preserving you for life.
Right.
They think you're basically putting your body into this fear of, I'm not going to do anything. Nothing's going to work. And so your body's like, let's just shut down for a second.
Yeah.
And that is not setting anybody up for success.
No,
so
that's adding more stress.
Right. So that's why I think about these. Like, I don't give a fuck mom. I'll breastfeed in public.
Yeah.
Right. But there are plenty of moms that are like, that's not something that I'm comfortable doing. Yeah. I'm not whipping a boob out at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Right. And so those are the moms, when we talk about hospital grade, giving them access to a lactation consultant, giving them, the best chance of a successful breastfeeding journey that they can have. That's the make or breaker.
Yeah.
And we're talking about things that are still yet to happen. I just saw the last thing that was set for 2030. Federal and state laws protect breastfeeding parents' rights to workplace lactation accommodations, paid family leave, and universal childcare. So we're still not there. And that's and we're hoping to make it happen by 2030. We're in 2023, 2024.
Yeah. Almost 2025. Hopefully it'll happen, but
in 5 years, way after we're done having children.
Dang it.
Yeah. I like that stipend. I think it was like a $6,000 newborn stipend that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I would love to know everyone's thoughts on this, though. So if you guys are listening in and you have something to say, good, bad, or indifferent about breastfeeding versus formula, would love to hear your thoughts. And if there's anything that you think that we got wrong, we're happy to hear that too, because maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe we won't. I don't know if we care about it.
Open-minded over here.
Very open-minded.
To hear everyone's stories.
Love to be wrong.
Hey, this did not happen to me. That's not how it worked.
Yeah. Love a conversation. So until next time, on Truth Moms.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.